'Tis the season to wake up to news that a former financial manager for the Jacksonville Jaguars has been accused of stealing more than $22 million from the NFL team through its virtual credit card program between 2019 and 2023.
Whoa.
This, my friends, is just another reminder that the business of banking is never boring. So, Steve, did you see that this employee pickpocketed the team for that amount of money?
You know what? That's why people go to church every Sunday, have a little bread and a little wine and say, I can do better. Yes, it doesn't surprise me.
Well, this guy did pretty well because he was buying Teslas and pickup trucks, a condo on the beach. He was buying designer watches. He was placing bets on gambling sites. He joined a country club. He was chartering private jets for his friends. And you know what he really did that surprised me?
What was that, Al?
He was buying crypto. I thought crypto was dead. Does this mean that it's coming back?
I'm telling you, I've got laser eyes sometimes. No one believes me around here, but what, 41,000? I've got laser eyes occasionally.
Yeah, you know what? Bitcoin certainly made a recovery this year from the start
Yeah.
to where we are at the moment. So, this guy is not in the running for any Gonzo Banker of the Year awards from Cornerstone Advisors, nor is he going to be making any guest appearances on Plugged In. But it certainly allows for an interesting start to this conversation between my man Steve Williams, who's over in Scottsdale, Arizona,
Hey, hey.
and me, Al Dominic, who is just slumming it in the District of Columbia. And so we just wanted to take a few minutes to look back on 2023 before really focusing on the first quarter of 2024. So,
Great.
like we've done all this year, we've taken some creative license from a few songs that some of us have put on repeat. If you were to hop onto LinkedIn and look up Steve Williams, you'll find that he unwrapped his wrapped Spotify playlist. So I thought we'd have a little bit of fun with his top 5 songs today. And so
Oh,
Steve knows
you're gonna
this.
see an 80s boy in parachute pants with these songs, but let's roll.
There's some MC Hammer in the waiting in the wings, but Steve's top 5 songs were "Missing You," "Only the Young," "Let My Love Open," "Stone in Love," and "Blood on Blood." At least that's how I interpreted everything. So this might be a
Yes.
challenge for some people, but really not for the two of us, right, Steve?
Well, Bailey, my videographer here is looking, going like, I got to go back to the history books for some of these hair metal songs or something. But
Oh, don't you worry,
hey,
Bailey.
it'll
We're
be
gonna
a
we're
good
gonna toss this
education
all up
for
on
him.
our shadow Spotify playlist that we love to encourage people to listen to when they need a break from their yacht rock and other like holiday set lists. So I thought we could start off with this song "Missing You," which was the #1 hit single from John Waite's 1984 album, which was called "No Breaks."
Mhm.
If you're not familiar, the lyrics in here talk about a man who's just in total denial about his emotions when a relationship goes south. So I think was probably his biggest hit. And I think we can
Absolutely.
use this, Steve, in a creative way because I've really been missing the Gonzo Banker Awards that come out only once a year. And since you're one of the originals, one of the OGs of the Gonzo Banker Awards, I thought we could get a little background from you before we give a shout out to some of the folks that might be in the running for 2023's Gonzo Awards.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, Cornerstone's going to be 22 years old in February. For 20 plus years, we've been geeking out on banking. And we created the Gonzo Awards long ago just to salute what we loved about banking, the bankers, the people in the industry, the technologists. And it's really fun out looking back on those awards. It started as we all sat in a room when we were a small company. Now, with 170 folks, we actually put out a survey and asked people to nominate what did they see interesting, who really rocked it in the year. And so, just a little fun. I look back at our last three Gonzo Banker of the Year award winners. Last year, it was Dave Brager at Citizens Business Bank out in Ontario, California. This is a bank who's just enjoying the fact that they spent decades building core deposits in this rate environment and they're rocking it. Randy Chesser from Glacier Bank the year before built a tremendous franchise, executed fabulous M&A. And before that, the very famous Jill Castilla. So we've seen a lot of Jill this year, but 2 years ago, we were saying, watch this. This is #1 with a bullet heading up. And we've had some credit union folks, April Klobus from Michigan State Credit Union was last year, and she'll be on our podcast early in 24, as you know.
Yep.
Jim Hayes, who was at State Employees, made a good run at State Employees and now is at State Department Credit Union. And a real terrific leader, Brett Martinez, out at Redwood in California, who does nothing but sleep and help his community. So some great folks that we really enjoy. But Al, one quick thing about the awards, we really like to dig deep and think about changing the industry. I went back 20 years to 2003, and a
Of
little bit
course
of
you did.
fun. The technology of the year in 2003 was a word we don't even say anymore: check truncation. So first of all,
Ooh,
the word check truncation was in the back office, how we would take the micro numbers and start to move that data between banks. That was the precedent to check 21, which now is check imaging, which became mobile deposit, and the life moves on. But yeah, we were having fun with those kind of innovations, and here we are now with large language models and machine learning.
wow. So check, is that spelled CHEQUE? I mean, how does that even
Check.
work?
Yes, and I hang out in my call centra. That's what you do in Canada and
Ah,
London. Yeah,
brilliant, brilliant. Well,
brilliant.
we can continue down this path, or we can say, some of the fun that we've been having internally over the last few weeks has been collaborating with the team.
Hmm.
So our partners, the MDs, we got consultants that are out walking the mean streets of the country all the
Yeah,
time, and we're trying to surface some of these really great stories that need to be memorialized in this upcoming Gonzo Award ceremony that we'll be
yeah.
putting out. So, is there anything that really stands out to you? Because I know
Well,
last year I was really pleased to nominate Frank Sorrentino for his spot-on description of the sixth borough of New York City being the state of Florida. And I'm just kind of curious: are there any ones that are kind of hitting you in a good place?
yeah, I think, I think that we definitely want to give a nod to one of our guests, Brent Beardall from WaFed, who started the year, with really a scare and tragedy in his life. But as you and I have talked about, he has taken that event and turned it into energy and optimism and reaching out. And a word he uses, love. And it's
Yeah.
not too corny to talk about love and banking. And so we're gonna salute that energy that Brent brought to the world. That's interesting, Al. One is deal flow is interesting. Not a lot of bank deal flow in 23. Let me hold this up for you. It's
Oh,
been very light compared to the 2021 era, and we could go back to the late 90s and see an explosion of M&A. We're thinking this is going to come back. We'll talk about that later. But also, even in the fintech world, the PE venture world was kind of a quiet year. So we think there's a lot of pent up demand for deals coming in the years ahead.
yeah. There's some stuff percolating, and I know that we're going to get excited in future months to really dig into some things that are announced. But
Yeah.
I think this is a nice way to transition to your second favorite song because it also ties in with something that you're talking about, which is all around pent up demand. So,
Hmm.
uh, again, Spotify does a nice job of teeing things up, and you were public with this, so I grabbed it. It's Only the Young. And so, knowing you, I thought you were talking about Journey, but I
Hmm.
also know that Taylor Swift has co-opted that song, and everything Taylor touches turns to gold.
Right.
I know you've been to some Taylor Swift concerts. I know with your stepdaughters and with my daughter, we've got a lot of Taylor in the rotation. So I'm just going to use Only the Young by Taylor Swift on this one
All right. All right. And
because
I'll
she's
point
got
out
some
real quick,
words.
Al, I was a top 1% Taylor listener because of my stepdaughters in soccer practice in 23.
A
That
likely
that was
story.
told to me by the data from Spotify.
A likely story, Steve. I know that you've been
Mhm.
listening to it morning, noon, and night. But
Asking for a
this
friend. Yeah.
exactly. Well, I had to look up these lyrics. They didn't come naturally, but they did say, don't say you're too tired to fight. It's just a matter of time. You can run. Up there, there's a finish line. So run and run and run. And that whole idea that we got to run, we got to perform, we've got to be ready to roll. I think this is why we think that 2024 will be the year of the CFO. And so
Mhm.
when you just showed that chart around M&A activity being really in the refrigerator for, really now the last few years,
Mhm.
I think CFOs are in this really interesting position as we move towards the first quarter because
Mhm.
there is a lot percolating, there is a lot incubating, and we just think that this is a big, big, big year for a bank's chief financial officer. You wanna build on what I'm
Yeah.
thinking
Well,
about?
let's, zoom out for a bit. And we had a central banking experiment of the last 15 years across the Western world that's never been done before. So we got lulled into a different kind of world. And I like to joke, Al, the poor VP of finance running the AL models for 15 years was like the Maytag repairman. And then kaboom in 22 and 23. Here we go. We're off to the races with balance sheet management, liquidity management, margin
Mhm.
management. And I feel sorry for the CFO. They wake up every morning with the reality of that from an earnings standpoint. But they know that from the fight for relevancy, what you said, they got to perform, but they also have to transform. So they can't have an investor deck that says we're ignoring AI or we're doing nothing with data. Or there's no transformation of our delivery to digital. All of that investment agenda has to continue. And I do want to say it was a wild year. We're looking right now at very low valuations, but I want to brag for a little bit, Al. This chart in May of this year, it was right when after First Republic had failed in April, you had SVB obviously, and Signature and others in March, and people were talking about PacWest. So I mortgaged my house, I sold my car, I took my wife's jewelry without telling her, and I went in on the KRE index, the KBW Regional Bank Index, at 35. It's now at 48. So it's way down from before, but you can see a bit of I'm not dead yet in regional banks. And I think sitting here at, 7 times earnings with 4% dividend yields, if these CFOs can get their team to perform good enough in 24, we can let some time take away some of those bond losses that we saw kind of holding back M&A. I think it's going to be a busy year of continuing with that investment agenda on transform, but then also we're going to start seeing some consolidation rear its head
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, and I think this goes to this, kind of third point, which is all around, you've got to perform, 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 and that's to earn the right to
Right.
transform. And this is something that our partner, Terrence, really was able to articulate nicely as we thought about, kind of where we as a firm can add value to some of these conversations. But
Hmm.
without going down the cornerstone route, I thought I'd take you down a Pete Townsend path, since
Hmm.
I know this was your third favorite song. So Let My Love Open the Door by Pete Townsend
Hmm.
has a lyric that says, "When everything feels all over, everybody seems unkind. I'll give you a four-leaf clover. Take all worry out of your mind." So that'll be my
That
gift to
doesn't
the
sound like
CFOs.
23 to me.
Well, first of all, it's not me singing it, so that's gift number one, right? Gift number two is again just putting it out here that you know for the last few years, this whole idea that you've got to run a business, be trying to protect the business while at the same time thinking about how you change it. I think bank boards in particular have understood and really put their arms around that,
Hmm.
thought.
Hmm.
This year, if we look back, it wasn't about margin expansion. It was about margin protection. It was about the liability side of the balance sheet, really making sure you're pricing things appropriately. A lot of
Yeah.
work has been done this year that I think positions smarter banks to be in a spot to be opportunistic over the next, 18 to 36 months. And so when we think about perform, 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 it's a lot of activity that's already happening and just getting even smarter and more efficient. But earning the right to transform, I think, ties into
Mhm.
certain, models that we've been playing around with. You want to kind of tease out one that we affectionately call our accretive bank performance model?
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now it's about intentionality. So when we see our clients executing well, they're thinking of the revenue side and they're not saying, oh, let's pray and light candles for deposits. They're breaking down the growth goal into where can we use analytics to improve retention of our large depositors? Where can we gin up small business in a more intentional way? What can we do with our digital front door to open things up? How do we do product management and loyalty around that? So I think that the revenue side, and then, there are dollars under the couch cushions in most banks, and it's really just getting the data to know
Yep.
with our vendor contracts, with our operating efficiencies, with how we are driving execution. There's money there, and it's really about building that discipline. But I think also, Al, one thing to really take a reflection on in 23 is you're right. We had to perform. So there was a lot about risk mitigation when it came to liquidity, capital, getting margin. They're keeping the regulators comforted that we are all as well. And you saw the Senate Banking Committee attempting that yesterday. But you warned us. You said early in the year, I hope this focus on risk mitigation doesn't make us a risk averse industry. And I will say, if I was going to give us a report card, we pulled back a bit on the transformation. We saw things like some of the challenges with banking as a service this year. I know you and I agree. Don't stop the transformation, even though there's hiccups along the way. So there is still opportunity for modernized banks. And when you see something like the Goldman Apple divorce, it also
Mhm.
shows us that big tech and big national finance is not immortal. Good entrepreneurial institutions can dig in there, keep trying things. But I think we got to have a risk appetite for execution, for trying new things, for leaning into technology. Don't confuse that with we can be very conservative when it comes to credit, capital, liquidity.
Yeah, well, and what you're saying lines up with certain conversations we've had on this particular series, where we've said, look, over the next 5 to 7 years,
Hmm.
what we'll call as smarter banks, they're going to be hyper efficient. They're going to become even more differentiated. They're not going
Right.
to use the word agile, but they're going to be nimble in the
Lots of
way they do things.
personalities. Yeah.
Lots of personalities, but they'll be data driven to your point, and
Hmm.
they're going to be opportunistic. And
Yeah.
these are terms and themes that seem simple on the surface, but they're very challenging to execute on a recurring basis. But the
Right.
smart business leaders understand you can create the proverbial flywheel by getting
Right.
your teams thinking in these terms.
Yeah, I want to encourage everybody out, if I could, to go out and grab from, investor relations website, the latest Intuit investor presentation, and look at how they look at their business, from a design thinking, from a market segmentation, from an expert AI data. I think we need to look at some of these players. Intuit has knocked it out of the park. And when I asked on LinkedIn recently, what's their secret? Some Intuit folks said, guys, it's our culture. We are a culture of execution. So I encourage you to go look at that investor deck, compare it to the average traditional bank investor deck, and say, what's the gap we need to fill when it comes to
Yep.
transformation, customer experience, those types of domains that are outside of finance, M&A, and credit.
Well, and also, think about the conviction the leadership teams have when they decide to sunset, something like Mint. I mean, in some ways, what
Mhm.
happened this year is no different from when Capital One decided to exit a very profitable, business line, and people looked at them like, "Why would you do this?" Understanding what you don't want to be, again, is one
Yeah.
of those, business strategies that people love to talk about, but very few actually put into practice.
Oh, Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they've all made a ton of mistakes along the way on their way to trillion-dollar valuations. So, absolutely, we've got to think that way about execution.
Yep. All right, so if we're thinking about execution, we want to keep to our script, if you will, which is again
Mhm.
to borrow from Steve's Spotify playlist for 2023. Since we've already used Taylor Swift, I'm going to come back to Journey just for a second and talk about "Stone in Love" from Journey's 1981
Oh my
album.
god, what a good song.
You probably love this one as much as I do,
Oh,
because I think
power
if
chord.
we're gonna use Journey, we're gonna take a journey, and that journey will be away from our computer screens with the
Mhm.
two of us reminding people it's okay to read and to listen to things that inspire us that wouldn't normally fall into your day routine. So I was thinking about some of the best things that we've heard or read this year. While I'm surrounded by things like The Wine Spectator, which is a guilty pleasure, I would say probably one of the best books I've read, and I know it's not new, and I know a lot of golfers have read it, and they look at me funny when I say The Match by Mark Frost was my favorite book of the year. But this is a golfing story about a best ball foursome between what was then the two greatest living golf professionals, and Ben Hogan and Byron Nelson, and the two greatest amateurs. So there's a gentleman named Harvey Ward and then Ken Venturi. And so this is a book, if you love competition, if you love to think about how we can control two things in our life, our attitude and our effort, that I think would
Mhm.
really resonate with folks looking to put a paperback in their luggage. So
Nice, and it's
that's
been
one,
said, Al,
Steve.
that banking and golf, they go like this, don't they?
Surprisingly, they do. People do enjoy a good day out on the course.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so that's something I read. What about you? Something
Well,
you read?
maybe it's cliche, but I would say that Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk was a real hit for me this year. And what I really took away that kind of sits with me every day now, thinking about Smarter Bank, is the Musk algorithm.
Yep.
First define the requirements, don't over engineer stuff, then take every step out you can. And I think that goes to our hyper efficiency goal. I just think that that kind of engineering focus on what he calls first principles. And I encourage people, read up on first principles in the Musk algorithm. We can apply that to banking, and the winners standing in 2030 are going to be those type of organizations. Now, tied to that was a really cool white paper I'd asked people to download. It was called the Technology Optimist Manifesto by
Mark
Mark
Andreessen.
Andreessen and Andreessen Horowitz. And all this kind of fear of social media and misinformation and AI, Andreessen put out a contrarian message. It said, "Guys, we evolve, we get better, things get better." And I love this line from Andreessen's white paper: "We believe in adventure, undertaking the hero's journey, rebelling against the status quo, mapping uncharted territory, conquering dragons, and bringing the spoils home for our community." I think we've gotten much too inward, dark, nihilistic, and I think Andreessen's kind of saying, "Come on, guys, let's look at the history of the world and get more optimistic about what technology can be and how we can have a growth mindset." So a good read for everybody out there.
Well, and as you say that, it's hard not to think about Andy Grove's "Only the Paranoid Survive" as you're talking about
Mhm.
this, because there's a little part in that book where he talks about how he would fire himself every year from Intel, and walk around the building and then come back up and rehire himself. But in that moment of leaving the building and thinking about what he would do, differently as the former CEO, and also what he would do as the incoming CEO, gave him a different perspective. And so I like how you're surfacing some ideas that people could use just to get a little bit more of a pep in their step when it comes to this. Now,
Yeah.
you did talk about Elon Musk. You encouraged me to start reading it. Admittedly, I started it off on Audible and thought, you know what, this is too much for me just to listen to. So I had to go out and pick up the physical copy. But when I did that, I made a switch. I had been reading Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin, which is all
Great
around
book.
Abraham Lincoln relationship with his cabinet and his just like incredible political skills and leadership ability. So I moved that over to my listening side of things. So I actually flip flop. So I wound up starting with Elon in my ears, and then I had to, put it in my eyes. Then, with Doris Kearns Goodwin, just that's another one that you could put onto
Yeah.
Audible, get on a plane, and instead of watching a movie, just like listen to how the president of the United States dealt with just some really vicious infighting to find some great results that
Yeah.
benefited everybody.
One of my favorite books of all time. It was a moment of truth in the country and the world. And for all you leaders out there who think your management team is a pain in the butt, I would encourage you to read Team of Rivals and understand, how do you make lemonade out of the fact we're all different. We have different operating systems, but together, things can be really cool.
We
So
can
a
do some
great
great things.
lesson. Love that book.
Well, I now I'm actually kind of embarrassed. We're, not doing anything really contemporary here. Like, I'm taking books that have been on the shelves for a while. We're talking about music that, has been around for a bit, but, we might as well just be ourselves and own it, because the number 5 song on your Rap Spotify list was "Blood on Blood," which is a Bon Jovi classic.
Oh, it's so
Uh,
good.
for those of you who love the synthesizers and all the other, like, pick-talking music, don't you worry. There is an epic drum solo to get this thing started.
Yeah.
So, in our
And it's
over
a song
synthesized.
about everybody has friends from their youth that they literally, if I got that call in the middle of the night, I'd be right by your side. Everybody has friends like that, that no matter where they go, if they're rich, poor, they treasure them. And that's what that song means to me.
Yeah, and I think this is where we wanted to just, remind people, let's not forget the good stuff that happened this year. You've
Mhm.
already mentioned Brent Beardall for keeping it real. He was in a
Mhm.
pretty scary plane accident, took some time to recover. I know that he's still, dealing with some of the physical rehab, but for him to be able to come out and, not just to give you a "I love you, man" as a kind of throwaway line, but to actually embody and model the behavior that relationships matter, and
Yeah.
how you treat people, with respect, can be done, without a lot of effort, but it makes a huge difference. I know
Right.
we're going to talk as an industry about Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic, Signature and Silvergate, and those are businesses that we shouldn't sleep on all the great work that they did. But obviously this year things got away from them. But let's just not forget the good stuff that happened. So we talked Brent. Another one that I just want to shout out is Ira Robbins at Valley.
Mhm.
With everything that's going on in Israel right now, to see him put himself on a plane and go over and really show what a leader has to be in trying times. I just have incredible respect for him. I know you have other folks that you've come across, but like,
Yeah.
who do you don't want to forget as we move forward?
Well, I just, we serve at Cornerstone, the regional bank, community bank, credit union markets, and with our benchmarks, Al, I can safely say that the 1,500 plus institutions we serve give over $1.5 billion to charitable causes every year. We see that bankers get paraded in front of Congress as greed and this and that. This is part of the fabric of our country, of our community, and that's a lot of money. And I'd couple with that volunteer hours, sponsorships, small business lending, real estate lending. I just think it's really cool. And I think we're going to have a very interesting 24 that might exacerbate political polarization, Springer show type politics. I think our clients are some of the adults in the room that hold things together. So
Yep.
there's thousands of stories we could really tell about great people and community, and that's a lot of what we try to spend time doing when we tell the stories of Joel Castillo or a Brent Beardall or an Ira Robbins.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mentioned our partner Terrence earlier. He's sort of some great ideas for how we might use this show going forward. We've already started to think about episodes that focus on wealth management with someone who
Hmm.
really knocks it out of the park and has kind of a stand up and take notice fee income strategy. We're looking at banks that are brutal story about how they reduced net interest expenses.
Hmm.
If there are banks out there that have really great cash management services, and these are things that strike a chord not just to you and me, but I think to others and to listeners. So we're actively thinking about how we can tell and help tell better stories because we both believe we do not want an industry that just has 8 to 10 super large banks that all act in the Citi, B of A, JP Morgan space with like a few
Yeah.
small folks fighting for scraps. We've got to have a vibrant community banking system.
Yeah, that kind of caps the year. You and I were both at a meeting where Truist former CEO, retired CEO Kelly King said, I
Really
think the
king.
regulators want $10 trillion banks. And you and I both got nauseous at the same time.
It was scary. It was
It's just
scary.
not American. We love the grassroots and we don't trust the man generally. We want checks and balances. And so I think you're right. That's what we're hoping the smarter banks, thousands of smarter banks, regional banks, credit unions will be part of that grassroots. And that's
Yep.
maybe our Christmas wish, Al.
They can do it, and we'll be there to help. So just to wrap things up, I know I've taken your playlist. I could have tried mine. I was looking at mine just out of interest.
Yeah.
Evidently, I watched a lot of White Lotus this year because, Do It Again by Rafael Acarra was my top song. I love the song, but I'm not sure people would be familiar with it. Second favorite was Chow Chow, which again, I'm gonna put up on the Spotify playlist. I think people love listening to this, like, on a Friday night when you're having friends over for some wine and, good conversation. But the 3rd song can really take us home because it's by Fleetwood Mac, and it is Everywhere. And I think Everywhere is where Cornerstone as a team has been in 2023, and certainly that's our plans for 2024. We're gonna just be out and about doing everything we can to help the troublemakers that Steve talked about. So, I thought I'd just wrap things up. Steve, you've got some big travel plans coming up, and I do as well. Why don't we just share where we're going to be? So if we can see people in real life, in person, we can talk about getting plugged in on the business of banking with them. So, what are like the next 6 weeks? Where do you think you're going to find yourself?
Oh, several bank clients. I know we're gearing up for the Q's Symposium in the Bahamas. I'm going to be one of the speakers there. I'm going to be talking to some regional leagues and even somebody like Restive Ventures, who's having a meeting. Going to be talking with some of the VC world of fintech. So a bit busy first half, first couple months of the year.
Yeah, it's very cool to think about where we're going to be. I know I'm going to be in Nashville, Tennessee, New York City, Scottsdale, Arizona. Out in January for Bank Directors Acquired Be Acquired conference, which is at the
Big
JW
show.
Marriott Desert
Yeah.
Ridge. Know that there's going to be a great audience there, so looking forward to that. Sticking around for the Janney investor event that follows. Got a trip up to Connecticut in February to see a tech company that's doing a strategic planning retreat before I get warm down at the Phoenix Open for a few days, and then I'll bounce over to Boca for KBW's Winter Community Banking Conference that I know will be a lot of fun and bring a great audience. So
Yeah.
for
Busy
both
stuff.
Steve and I, there's going to be some planes, trains, and automobiles in our future. But if you are interested in seeing us, drop us a line, hit us up on LinkedIn. Certainly we've got some great guests from this 2023 calendar year that still have a ton of relevance. And as we said, we've got some really cool ones in the queue for 2024. So really, we just want to say thanks for getting plugged in with both Steve and me in 2023.